Okay. Today's broadcast is sponsored, I believe, by Bency Bench. No, I didn't notice. Today's broadcast is being sponsored by Bency Bench. I believe today is the Baba Sally's right? The Bishop Yosy also? Oh, I didn't know that. I did not know that, but let me see. A few sentences. Here it is. Oh. Today's broadcast, Dav Gimel and Nazir, is sponsored by Bency Bench and Mishpachtoi in honor of the Yom Hilula Dalet Shvat, which is tomorrow, of Rabbi Yisrael Abuchatzera, known as the Grand Tzaddik and Kabbalist, the Baba Sali, Schusa Yogan Aleinu, the Al Kol Yisrael. Okay, Gavalti. So yesterday we learned about the beginning of Nazir. We learned about Kinuyim and about Yodois, and we learned that the Tana will first start with the basics, which are Kinuyim, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that is, who held that Kinuyim are other languages. Then the Tana mentions Yodois, which is a drasha, and in Adi de Chaviva, since the drasha is Chaviv, the Mishnah starts off with to explain and elaborate on the Yodois. That was according to Rabbi Yochanan. But according to Rish Lakish, where Yodois are Dr. Seuss words, literally words that Chachamim bodu milibam, well, then why would we start with Kinuyim? Yodois at least are grounded in a drasha of a deraisa. So the Mefarish told us that according to Rish Lakish, you're going to have to say that the Chesura Mechsura is even on the first words of the Mishnah. So instead of the Mishnah starting with Kol Kinuyim Naziris, the Mishnah will actually start with Kol Yodois Naziris Kinaziris. The Gemara also probed as to what Nazir is doing here in middle of Noshim rather than in Kochim, and the Gemara told us that it all comes because wine is what ultimately leads to the breakdown of a marriage. That's why we find the Maseches Nazir is in Noshim. Okay? Because Nazir makes someone stay away from wine. Okay. We learned about the Abba principle, right, versus the Abba principle, right? Are you mafarish the last thing you left off with or not? Okay. And then we got into the Sugi Yadayim She'ena Mechichos, and we learned a fascinating machloikas. At the end of the day, the case of Ahei was someone said Ahei, I will be, and there happened to have been a Nazir walking by. And the Gemara says that's Yadayim Hamachichos. Shmuel holds even Yadayim She'ena Mechichos have a Yadayim. And the case was where someone goes over to a woman, gives her a ring, and says Arayat Mikudeshes, does not say Li, that's considered Yadayim She'ena Mechichos. And Shmuel holds that works. Zokt the Gemara that if there was no Nazir Oivel Lefanov, it wouldn't even be Yadayim She'ena Mechichos. It wouldn't mean anything because Ahei could mean Ahei B'tainis. Therefore, there has to be a Nazir Oivel Lefanov. The Gemara says even if there isn't a Nazir Oivel Lefanov, it's still not 100%. It's very Eina Mechiach, because maybe what he means to say is Ahei, I will pay for the karbonis of that Nazir. Who said he wants to be a Nazir himself and pay for his own karbonis? Maybe he just wanted to pay for the karbonis of that Nazir. So the Gemara says, in fact, from the language, we don't see that he means Nazir. It could equally mean that he just wants to pay for the karbonis. But it's also speaking where he said, that's what I meant. I meant Naziris. So on that, we have a bombadik chiddush. The Gemara asks, what is the chiddush of that if he's identifying what he meant? So the Gemara answers, Ma'u detema be'inan piv v'liba shavin kamash malon. The question is kamash malon what? The Mefarish is gairis kamash malon the loy be'inan. You don't need piv v'liba shavin. And even though it's not clearly articulated by my mouth that I want to be a Nazir, because it could mean I just want to accept on myself the karbonis, by Nazir we relax the requirement of piv v'liba shavin. Tosfos freaked out, and he said, how could you say that you don't need pivili b'shavin. There's no such thing. Tosfos brings a riot. If you don't need pivili b'shavin, well, then why do they have to say anything at all? Let him just do the kabbalah b'lei. Lamali over the Why do you need a nazir over the Let him just say a hey, and let him say I meant a hey nazir. That didn't mean a hey b'tainis. So Tosfos says, of course you need pivili b'shavin, but we've relaxed the threshold of how clearly your speech has to be. We relaxed that threshold dramatically when it comes to nazir. And pivili b'shavin could even mean if there's some slight mashmoy, some slight connotation of your words to mean nazir, and you clarify it by saying that's what you meant, that will also be considered to have passed the threshold of pivili b'shavin. But not that there's no need for pivili b'shavin. That, in fact, cannot be. And that takes us to the next case in the Mishnah of a
I just want to comment. I'd like to comment on this Abba theory. We find just the opposite in the Torah, where Rashi comments, and if there's a dialogue and somebody's asking two questions, Rashi will often say, he answered Rishon, Achron, Achron. So, and Rashi seems to laud the individual for answering that way. So that contradicts that whole Abba idea.
Yeah, and in fact, the Gemara backs away from that. The Gemara says in each Mishnah, we have to find the specific reason as to why the Tana chose that order.
So we dismiss the Abba?
Yes.
We dismiss that? Okay.
Yes. I just want to mention that you're Mamash Malam Chus on me. I meant ABBA, who was a musical group. I don't know, remember when I grew up. Oh, I don't know, but I heard of ABBA. But you were Malam Chus and I meant ABBA. So I appreciate it. See, ABBA only has one base. ABBA had two B's in it. Okay, so the head of Gemara Vayter.
I say potato, you say potato, yeah.
Okay. Gewaltig. Thank you, Monty. Okay, no, I want to be beautiful. That's a Nazir. Frag the Gemara. Vidilma. They want to be beautiful because I want to have these beautiful locks of hair. Frag the Gemara. Who said that's what he means when he says he wants to be beautiful? Are there no other ways to be beautiful? Vidilma of mitzvahs. I want to be beautiful to the Rebbeinu Shalom because I want to engage and indulge in Hidur mitzvah, in a beautiful mitzvah. Kidetanya, like we learned in the Brayso. It says in the pasuk, Zekeli van Veyu. This is my Rebbeinu Shalom, and I want to. I'm not sure what the word Aveyu is. I want to make beautiful mitzvahs. I would love to know what the article say what the exact type of Aveyu is. Considering that I say it every day, Yosy, it probably would be.
Our scroll translates it elsewhere as glorify.
Glorify. Here he says beautify, because that's what we're trying to bring out from it over here. Okay. A noah lefanav b'mitzvahs. I will be beautiful in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom's eyes in mitzvahs. Esa lefanav sukkah. I will build a beautiful sukkah. Lulav na, a beautiful lulav. Tzitzis na, a beautiful set of tzitzis. Or echtoiv lefanav sefer Torah na, I will write a beautiful sefer Torah. V'acharchenu b'shirayin noim, and I will wrap the sefer Torah in beautiful silk. So let's stop here a second. There's actually another girsa. I'm not sure if the Bach brings it down. But there's another girsa that there's one more example. There's one more example. No, he doesn't bring it here. There's one more example of I will write the Sefer Torah with a kolmus noah. So you see a distinction. The end product is the end product. It doesn't change. But I just wrote the Sefer Torah with a kolmus noah. I want to get to that in a minute. But I just want to talk a little bit about Hidur mitzvah because the Gemara is talking here about Hidur mitzvah. There's a big lom de shayla if Hidur mitzvah is part of the mitzvah or if it's an add-on. And there are many nafkaminas. There's a machloikis by Neiros Chanukah between the Rambam and Tosfos. The Rambam holds that Ner Ish Ubeisoi means that the Mahadrim and Mahadrin is for every person in the household you light according to how many nights of Hanukkah it is, which is similar but not precisely to what we do. The Baal HaTosfos says, no, Mahadrin is only the Balabayas. Only the Balabayas lights one for every night. When it comes to Psak Halacha, usually the Mechaber passes like the Rambam, and the Ramah passes like the Tosfos. But in Hilchos Neres Chanukah, it's not that way. The Ramah passes like the Rambam, which is what we do. Mahadrim and Mahadrin, every person in the household lights a Ner Chanukah depending on how many nights there are, and it's the Mechaber who passes like Tosfos. But if we drill down a little bit into the Rambam, the Lashon Rambam is not that everybody in the family lights the amount of Neris that indicates the night that we're at, which is what we do. The Rambam doesn't say that. The Rambam says the Bal Habayis lights enough Neris, so all the menorahs that we light in our home, the Bal Habayis light. That's how the Rambam. That's the Lashon HaRambam. So there's actually a machlokes Rambam and the Ramah, even how to pass like the Rambam. Who lights all these neiros? So the Brisker Rav is masber that the machlokes is Hidur Mitzvah part and parcel of the Mitzvah? You can't do Hidur separately. You can't have a delicious slice of bread and then have a chunk of butter. That's not bread and butter. That's bread and butter, right? If you want to have pizza, you can't have a big piece of dough and then eat a chunk of cheese and then drink some tomato sauce. It's not going to work. Hidur Mitzvah is only part of the Mitzvah. So in Mela, you can't have one person doing the Mitzvah and somebody else doing the Hidur Mitzvah. That's why the Rambam learned that the Balabais has to do everything. However, the Rambam holds Hidur Mitzvah is like an add-on. It's a bonus round. And that does not have to be done part and parcel of the Mitzvah. And the Brisker Rav brings a raya from a very interesting Gemara in the Masechah Shabbos that talks about a bris. And the halacha is that there are tzitzin ma'akvenes amila, the tzitzin she'ein ma'akvenes amila. There are certain pieces of skin of the orla that if you don't take those off, it's not a proper bris. But there are some areas of skin that if you take it off, it's a Hidur Mitzvah, but if you don't take it off, it's still a kosher bris. And the Gemara says that you're chayzer to go back to cut tzitzin hama'akven samila. So I assume the moil did his bris, and he didn't cut certain tzitzin, and then he finished the bris. He was masich das. He put his knife down, whatever he did. The question is, do you go back even for tzitzin shaloi ma'akven or only tzitzin hama'akven? So the Gemara says you only go back. The moil only goes back to cut the tzitzin that are ma'akav demila, not those that are not ma'akav demila. And the Rambam quotes the Gemara verbatim, word for word. However, Rashi sticks in something. Rashi sticks in, you don't go back to remove the tzitzin, she'ein ma'akvenes hamila, b'Shabbos. Which means the Rambam holds, even in the weekday, if you finish the bris, you don't go back to cut the tzitzin, she'ein ma'akvenes hamila. You know why? Because once the mitzvah is over, you can't add hidur to it. It's not like sprinkles that you put on your ice cream. It's part and parcel of the mitzvah. Once the mitzvah has already been done, completed, and it wasn't done to Hidur, there's no way to go back and fix it because Hidur is part and parcel of the mitzvah. Well, and that's consistent with the Rambam Shita that the Balabais has to light them all. Right, that's exactly what Rashi holds. But the Rambam says even in the weekday, you don't go back. Why wouldn't you go back in the weekday? It's because it's too late. The mitzvah is over. You cannot go back and add Hidur to a mitzvah that has already passed. Rashi learns you could go back, and that's how we paskin. We light, everyone in the family lights menorahs to create the mahadrim and hamahadrim, and that's why Rashi says that the Gemara means only on Shabbos you don't go back, because like Dubi says, you could be mechal Shabbos with chabura to do the ikar mitzvah of milah, but to go back and do hidur mitzvah that you cannot do. And everybody knows the famous halachic story with Reb Chaim. They asked Reb Chaim a shaila. I have two esrogim. One esrog is the most beautiful Behudidika esrog that I've ever seen, but it might be puzzle. It might not really be esrog. It might literally be a lemon, right? On the other hand, I have another esrog that's miyuchis. I know it's good, but it's not a Behudidika esrog. What should I do? So Reb Chaim said, of course, you should make the bracha on the Mehuder one first. Why? Because if you make the bracha on the not Mehuder one, you're Yosy. Once you're Yosy, you can no longer do Hidur Mitzvah because you're Yosy the Mitzvah. So therefore, make the bracha on the one that's Mehuder. It might be possible. And then right afterwards, shake the other esrog. So this way, if you got lucky and it happens to be a kosher esrog, so you got it done with Hidur. And if not, you still were able to be Mekayim the Mitzvah, the base Mitzvah later on. That's the shayla over there. Yeah. I thought you meant borrow. Okay, so that's the first shtickle. Now the other shtickle is there's two types of Hidur mitzvahs. There's Hidur mitzvah of doing the mitzvah beautiful, buying a beautiful lulav nesrik, but there's also a Hidur mitzvah, l'mashal, the halacha is you're not supposed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach, so that the mitzvah of achilas matzah that you do at night will be with Hidur, it'll be the b'tei oven. So there, the actual ma'aseh mitzvah is the same. It's how it's done that creates Hidur. Now the shayla is that considered also a component of Hidur mitzvah? So based on that, there was a gears over here that stuck in, I'll write the Sefer Torah with a kol musma. That doesn't change the actual Sefer Torah, but using a kol musma is a Hidur mitzvah in the ma'aseh mitzvah. So there's the Hidur mitzvah of the actual mitzvah, and then there's the Hidur mitzvah of the ma'aseh mitzvah, how you do the mitzvah. They're all factors of Hidur. But I'll call upon the Gemara is asking here when it says a noah lefonav the mitzvahs. When he says hey noah, who said it means physical beauty? Maybe it means doing mitzvahs behidur. Amar Shmuel, Zok Shmuel, it's very simple. Shetafos b'sayrei. When he said hey noah, he was holding on to his hair. So that clearly indicated what his intention was. Amar Enoah. He says I should be beautiful. Frank the Gemara, are you telling me that becoming a Nazir is beautiful? Nazira milsad aveira. It's an aveira to become a Nazir. How could you suggest that someone should say a Noah when it comes to Naziris if in fact Naziris is an aveira? The Gemara in. As a matter of fact, it is Noah. I'm sorry? Because the Gemara couldn't understand that. The Gemara couldn't understand it. And I had to play along as if I understood it. To make some of the best of theirs are very gishmak. So Gemara in. Dafilu Rebbe Lazar Kfar. Rebbe Lazar Kfar, was it Kapor? How does ours go? Kapor. Even according to Rebbe Lazar Kapor, the Omer Nazir Chayte, who else a Nazir is a Chayte, Hanamili Gabi Nazir Tome. That's only a Nazir Tome. It's Chayte. The ID the boy mister, what happens? Imagine a fellow is a Nazir for 30, he was makabel 30 days of Naziris, and the 29 days went perfectly well. And then what should he do? Someone died in this building and he became Tameh. Now he messed everything up and he's got to start all over again. He's got to start back from scratch. Kitime Israel. So Hasam, there we say that it's Chayte. You know why? Hasamu Dilma Asi Lemever al Naziruse. He's going to have Charata on his Naziris. The Mefarishes Lemever al Naziruse means after he starts over all over again, he's going to think, you know what? If I would have known what I'm getting into over here, I would never have wanted to do it. And the Mefarish actually says, so his karbonis are chulun nazara. It can't mean they're really chulun nazara, because unless he's going to be shoyal by a chacham to be matter his naziris, of course it's a good carbon. But what it means is that the carbon isn't a beautiful carbon, it's a carbon that's based on the naziris that he had chayrata on. That's a nazir chayte. Aval nazir tar. But a nazir who fulfilled his naziris first time around, exactly as planned, lav chayte karibay, he wouldn't be considered a chayte. It's a very interesting Tosfos over here, and I'm still not sure what the Olam learns when they learn Nazir. If they learn the Mefarish or Tosfos, neither of them are as gishmak as the Ran was, but I'm grateful that we have something. So let's see what the Tosfos says. Umashani afilu Rebbe Kapar Dilma Osi Lemeral Naziruzoi Lishnois Biyayin Kiarch Loyam. If it's taking too long because he had to redo it because he became Tomei, he's not going to be able to handle it. Aval Tor Loy Chayte Karin. The Kasha, Frek Tosfos, the Baalma I see the Rebbe Lazar Afilu Anazir Tor. In Shas, Frek Tosfos, Rebbe Lazar is brought down to say that a Nazir is a Chayte, even not like what our Gemara says, only if it got messed up and he had to start over again. And now he has Charata that it's a lot bigger commitment than he had originally anticipated. But rather, even if everything went perfectly, the Nazir Chayta Al Shem said Sir Atzmim in Ayayin, because he refrained from enjoying wine, which the Rebbe Shem gave us to enjoy. The Tahar Nami Tzas Kari Lechayte. And now we're going to see Tosfos says there's no absolutes. Mitzvahs have good components to them and bad components, and vice versa. The Torah Nami Tzas Kari Lechoti. There's a stigl avlo because he is holding himself back. He's restraining himself from yain. Ha mitzvah rabba alachet. The mitzvah is greater than the chet. Lekach Kari Leina. In Nazirus itself, yes, there are some parts that aren't ideal, but overall, it's a good thing. It's like somebody stays up late at night to learn, and then he sleeps in the next day and comes late and doesn't shackle. There's a big mitzvah to learn, but there are parts that there's no absolutes. There's good and bad mixed together. Midi dahava misana tainas chaloim b'Shabbos. Someone who fasts the tainas chaloim on Shabbos, he has to do that. The yesh le mitzvah levat lachaloim. But there's an avera mixed into it. Uksas avera also sheis ana b'Shabbos. As a matter of fact, so you're supposed to fast, but then you're supposed to fast another day to be mechaper on the aver that you fast for Shabbos. So you see, you have a mitzvah that there's some aver involved. But a Nazir became tamei, that's already complete chayte. Because when he became tamei, it resets the clock. The kaved be'enav hamaisa. It's difficult for him. And surely he's going to regret his kabbalas nazirs. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. I'm running late now, so I got to start moving fast. Zok the heilige Gemara weiter. Hareini kozeh. Someone said, "I want to be like him." Frek the Gemara, nehi nami the toughest besai. Even though he's holding his hair, in other words, we've already established in the earlier case that these not clear words don't work unless there's some other circumstantial indication. So let's say we'll learn like we learned in the earlier case that he was holding his hair, but Hareini Kozeh Loi Mashma, I'm reading into this, Loi Mashma, that it took full Naziris. So that's what Tosfos learns. Tosfos takes out this next word Omar, because you can't say Hareini Kozeh Loi Omar, because actually he did say Hareini Kozeh. That's the words that he used. So Tosfos learns Hareini Kozeh Loi, he takes the word Omar out. Hareini Kozeh Loi is still not proof enough. Just because he's holding his hair and saying Hareini Kozeh, how does that show he wants to be a Nazir? Shmuel, in fact, you have to say Shigoyin Shaya Nazir Overlafan. When someone says Hareini Kozeh, it also must be speaking where there was a Nazir walking by, and you don't need to have long hair to try to speak out. The fact that a Nazir is walking by and someone said Hareini Kozeh is good enough. Hareini Misalsal, I want to be able to play with my hair, like I said about Yosy Tzaddik, that he was Misalsal B'Sayroi. The Hadin Silsal Saira. How do you know that when he says Silsal means he's playing with his hair? Hareini Misalsal. Kida Amrlei Hahi Amsa the Vei Rebbe Lahu Gavra. The maidservant of Rebbe, of the house of Rebbe, once told somebody who was playing with his pious, Ad Mosai Ata Misalsal B'Sayrecha. How long are you going to play with your hair? Yes, the Gemara brings a raya from here. The Gemara brings a raya from her what misalsal means. In fact, that's right. In fact, the Gemara Ema Torah. Maybe when someone's at a rating misalsel, it means I'm going to be hard of being in learning, because we find a pasuk regarding learning. Dichsiv silsala, hard of a mix. Get yourself deeply involved in Torah. Usur rememcha, it'll lift you up. Amashmul hachanami shetafas b'sayrei. In fact, when he said rating misalsel, he was actually playing with his hair, and therefore it shows that he's referring to Naziris. What if he said Hareini Mechalkel, which means I will grow my hair? How do you know that kilkel means referring to hair? Because it's not to be learned. Sid. Sid is like it was a cement, but they used it to smear on their faces to remove hair. They used it as a hair removal chemical. And the question is how much Sid, if you carry it on Shabbos, is enough that it's called you carried something of significance. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, they lost kilkel, enough that you would be able to get the hair off of kilkel, which the Mefarsh's tinpul of Alaz, it means the temple. She folds back the hair on her forehead, I think because it's forehead or her skull, came in Megayer, like combing it, like scraping it, so basically she's gathering her hair together and then she's putting a shmata over it. So you see there that kilkel refers to hair. And Rav said it means, Basida means, I think it means her temple, I guess when she pulls her hair back from her temples so that it should be inside her tichel. Maybe kilkel means ema mezin anya. Maybe what he meant was, I want to support people. Yosef is aviv v'sechov. Amar Hachanami shetafes b'sarei. Instead of Hareini Mechalkel, who was holding his hair, so clearly he didn't mean he wants to be a finance anybody. It means he wants to become a Nazir. So interesting enough, Yosef was the Mesalsel, but Yosef was the Mechalkel as well. There are two people in the Torah that are referred to as a tzaddik. Yosef had tzaddik, right? And Noach is tzaddik. You know what they both had in common? Each of them supported the whole world. Noach supported the whole world. It wasn't a very big world at that time, but everyone in the world he supported. And Yosef, a tzaddik, supported the world. So we now know the definition of two words. A tzaddik is someone who's mefarnes people, a lot of people, and a gavarabba is someone who makes people wear masks. So far we have the definition of two important terms that the Gemara mentions. Gewaltig. Zog the heilige Gemara weiter. Sorry? Who? I'm not talking about the Gemara story. Zog a gavarabba is someone who saves people from pain and from suffering. Zog the heilige Gemara weiter. Harei alai l'shaleach pera. I'm mekabel upon myself to grow my hair. The shalech means to grow hair. Harei Nazir. How do you know the lashon shiluach means I'm going to grow it? The chsiv, it says, this is a beautiful bracha in Shir Hashirim. Let me read it from the pasuk so I pronounce it right. Shalachayich pardes rimoinim. Shalachayich, what grows out of you, meaning your children, will grow beautifully like an orchard of rimoinim of pomegranates. So you see, shalachayich means growth. How do you know? Maybe it actually means removal, diversion. It says in the pasuk, Hashem diverts and channels the water away from where it doesn't need to be to where it does need to be. So maybe it means removal. Zok Gemara, I'll tell you what it is. By a kohen hedyot, how do we know the kohen hedyot was supposed to get a haircut once every 30 days? I believe the kohen gadol got a haircut once a day, but the kohen hedyot was supposed to get his haircut once every 30 days. How do we know that a kohen hedyot gets a haircut once every 30 days? The pasuk says, "V'roisham." The pasuk in Yecheskel says, "V'roisham lo yigaleichu." They should not cut their hair, but upera lo yishalechu. But they shouldn't have a pera either. What they should have is ksayim yiksamus r'shem. That was the special haircut that they used to have. Now, the Gemara was struggling to understand, I believe it's in Sanhedrin, exactly what does the mean pera lo yishalechu, and what is exactly this hairstyle that the Kohen Hedyot had? So the Gemara said there, Tana pera yalav. The Tana learns the word pera that we just mentioned that discusses the haircut of the Kohen Hedyot to the pasuk where the Torah discusses a Nazir, and it says, "Kol yemei neder nizroi tar lo yavar al roishoi ad melois hayamim asher yazer lashem kadosh yeh gadel pera sayroishim." So from here, pera, we know it means 30 days. How do you know pera means 30 days? Because it says yeh, kadosh yeh. Yeh is the gematria 30. There's 2 yuds, which is 20, and 2 hays. So that's how we know that a Kohen Hedyot has to grow his hair for 30 days. So since we know that the Kohen Hedyot has to take a haircut every 30 days and says so it means clearly that he shouldn't grow it longer than 30 days. So there you see that shiluach means growth. Or maybe we have a different pasuk. Even when it says maybe that also doesn't mean diversion of water. Maybe it also means nami ribayu. Maybe it also means an abundance of water. Because when you add water to pears, then they grow. So when it says maybe it actually means not diverting water, but diverting water to pears, and then the pears will grow. So it's referring to the growth of the pears as a result of the water. Okay, we have another nusach. Harei alai tziparin. There the Gemara, our Mishnah said, there's a machlokes. Reb Meir said harei alai birds. Reb Meir says Nazir. The Chum say it's not a Nazir. So now we need to know what exactly does tziparin mean. Now, as a matter of fact, a Nazir who completes his Nazir's B'tahira does not bring any birds. The only type of Nazir that actually brings birds is a Nazir who did not complete his Nazir's B'tahira. He rather became tummy. So, Frank Gemara, my time at Reb Meir. Why did Reb Meir say that harei alai birds is going to be considered a Kabbalas Naziris? Omer Shlokish, I'm sorry. The Gemara discusses that. Omer Shlokish, Siparin Smuchen L'Seir Kibul Alav. What he meant is, I want to be makabel upon myself what it says in the pasuk Siparin, and in the pasuk in Daniel where it says the word Siparin, it has the word hair near it. So therefore, when I say Siparin, I'm referring to a pasuk somewhere in Tanakh that happens to also have near it a lashon of sar. So that's what he means when he says it. That's why it's a Kabbalas Naziris. The Chsiv, it says in Daniel, Ad di Sire, he was, I believe it was Nebuchadnezzar. I think it was Nebuchadnezzar who was cursed, and he was going to end up becoming like an animal, and he would live out in the forest. And Adi Sire Kanishrin Rabba, until his hair grows so long like the feathers of an eagle, Vitafroi, and his nails will grow so long, Kitziparin, like the claws of a bird of prey. So you see the word Tziparin, birds, is right near the pasuk of Sar. So that's, I'm happy you mentioned that it's a far stretch, because in fact Tosfos gives us a little bit more insight. So let's see Tziparin hasmuchin l'seir kibul hamurin b'pasuk etzel sar. When he said Tziparin, he meant some pasuk somewhere where it's near the word sar. Kloimar afal pidami Tziparin stama. Even though he didn't say anything about sar, he just said birds. The masnis and stama comer in our Mishnah, it's clear he just said birds. A person, when he says tziparim, he's referring to tziparim that's near here, but with a twist. This is how it's understood, the words of this person. Why is he a Nazir? The kivon de tziparim smuchim l'seir ka'amar. He probably means birds that are near here. Therefore, what he probably means is, not pshat, I want to accept upon myself the word that's written somewhere in Tanakh near the word Tziparim. That's not what he means. What he means to say is, Harei alai mitzvah the shaykh Tziparim. What he really means to say is, I want to accept upon myself Naziris, which has a connection to Tziparim should I become tamei? Tluyin the mitzvah sar that also involves a mitzvah that has to do with hair. The Hainu Nazir shem nit mitzarch tziporin. V'hachi pirush mitzvah tluy b'tzvar. That's what he meant. Achin ein lefarish mishum smichus greater kedem lefarish tamuda. You cannot take the Gemara at face value that it literally means I'm saying one word and I mean some pasuk somewhere in Tanakh where there's a word similar to it. Because as Chaim said, it's a little bit far-fetched. But what it means is, and Tosfos brings a right, what if he says Harela Nishrin? It says Nishrin in the pasuk also, near Sar. So it's just a dogma. We're just illustrating that there's a connection between the words. When he said tziporin, he meant Naziris, which could involve tziporin, which also has Sar involved. So it makes it a little bit less far-fetched. But I'll call upon what you see from here. What you see from here is we've relaxed the piv v'liva shavim quite a bit, right? In other words, you don't have to be so explicit in what you're saying. But that's it's not fair that we never hit on the pasuk to learn the Gemara because everybody knows. How do Yeshiva Buchim know Chimish? They know it. Chimish and Novi. They know from the Gemara. How do they know Gemara? From the Rishonim. How do they know Rishonim? From the Achronim. How do they know the Acharim? From the Rashi V'Shir. So man, I'll skim to get. So the Gemara is saying he means Harel Tziporim, the Tziporim of Naziris. The Gemara is bringing a dogma that you see that you could still too. Yeah. Okay. I'm at 6:44. I have 6 minutes. I have 5 minutes left. So I got to push on. Zog the Gemara weiter. Reb Meir Savar matfish inish b'midi desamachlei. A person will sometimes use a word when he's really referring to what's near it, what's near it, and that's a normal way of people to speak, and therefore it's a good Kabbalah's Naziris. Rabbanan Savri loy matfish inish b'midi desamach. People don't speak that way. Maybe that's too far-fetched, and in fact, it's not a good Kabbalah's Naziris. Zog the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, so that was Rish Lakish's pshat. Rish Lakish's pshat was when someone says tziparin, well, you mean this far-fetched cheshbon that it has to do with hair, and sometimes you bring tziparin if you're b'tamei. That's how Rish Lakish says. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't like that pshat. Rabbi Yochanan with the chula amaloi matvis. People don't speak that way. That cannot be pshat in Reb Meir, white Naziris. Rather, Hanitama Reb Meir, the chashinon shemet tziparin nazir tamei kibbul. Exactly what Dubi was saying. Maybe what he means to say is, tziporin, I want to be makabel upon myself to bring tziporin of a nazir tamei if I became tamei. And that's the svara of Reb Meir who holds his nazir. Frank the Gemara, what are the words you're using of Chashinon? Michli chashinon kamar. So it's not crystal clear that he means to be makabel upon himself the tziporin of a nazir tamei. Maybe, who said when he says tziporin, he's even Bechlal referring to Naziris. Dilma tziporin nedava kibbul Allah. Maybe he's just being makabel upon himself regular birds of a nedava. Why would I think that? So the Tosfos speaks out something very important. Tosfos says, the Evshir, the Leka, I'm sorry, that's Viter. That's Viter. The Tosfos says in Amud Aleph, I believe. He says that it's not likely that someone's going to want to be makabel upon himself Naziris. The Cholkama, the Ikal of Rushe Dibure, the Lav Naziris, Kibbul Alei, if we could possibly explain his words that he's not being makabel Naziris, El Nether Acher, but some type of other commitment, Shaper Dami, he makes Shaper Tzvei, it's better. You know why? The Lo Nichel initially Kibbul Alei Tzipur the Naziris, the Chomer Alei Utrichalei. Becoming a Nazir is difficult. So we're not going to so easily say that's what he meant. We need to have a little bit more of an indication from what he said that that's what he meant. So maybe he just meant Tzipur Nedava. Zok Gemara, that's not how people normally donate Tzipur Nedava. Imkein Harei Lekein. Normally someone would say Harei Lekein. He didn't say that. He said Tzipur. So where does it mention Tzipur? It mentions it. It doesn't say the word explicitly Tzipur in the parsha of Naziris. It actually says Toirim of Nayoina. So for the Gemara, why don't we say he means Tzipur? And there's actually a parsha in the Torah where it mentions specifically Tzipur. B'dilma Harei Alai Tzipur Mitzayir Kamer. Maybe he's referring to Mitzayir because it actually uses the word. It actually uses the word there. And the Iran and the Mefar speaks out. I'm sorry, Taisha speaks out. Even if there's no mitzvah there, the Efsher, the Leka Chad mitzvah, the Tan Tziporim. There's got to be somebody in the world today who is a mitzvah who's going to need those birds, and maybe that's what he wanted to be mechayiv himself. It's once again, when he said it, there was a Nazir, and the Torah speaks out, he thought maybe it was a Nazir Tameh, so that's why he said Tziporim. Correct the Gemara, if there was a Nazir Tameh over Lefanov, so then maybe, how do you know he's trying to accept upon himself Naziris, Vidilma Nazir Tameh, Ulapoitre min Karbonos of Kamar. Maybe all he's trying to do is tell this fellow, I'm going to pay for your Karbonos. But he didn't want to be Makabal upon himself a full Naziris. So the Gemara, Nazir Tahar over Lefanov, and the Tosha speaks out, and he knew for a fact that this Nazir was Tahar. So he knew for sure this Nazir did not need Karbonos. And he still said, that we translate that he wants to be a Nazir, which could potentially lead him to have to bring Tziporim. I'm sorry? My Beinayu, what's the difference between Rabbi Yochanan's Pshat and Rish Lakish's Pshat? That's more very simple. Ika Beinayu, Kagayin Da'amr Tziporim Smuchen L'Sar Alai. What if he spoke out Tziporim Smuchen L'Sar Alai? So he made it clear what Tziporim he meant. Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that wouldn't help. Afagav de Amar Hachi, even if you said Tziporim Smuchen L'Sar, nevertheless, because a person never is makabel anything through Smuchen. It has to be Minei Ubei in the words that Tziporim means Naziris. But Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Afagav de Nazir Lefanov, according to Rish Lakish, if you said Tziporim Smuchen Alai, you would even be a Nazir if there was no Nazir there. Frank Gemara, I don't understand. Mikam Laman Davar, Matvis, Inish, Bimilsa, the Samachlei. Can anybody hold like Rish Lakish that someone speaks so indirectly? But Tanya we learned, Ha'emer Yamin, if someone says Yamin, Hareza Shvua, that's a Shvua. Where did you get that from? My timer. Lav Mishum. I'm sorry, I forget. Mikam Laman Davar, Loy Matvis, Inish, Bimilsa, the Samachlei. Could anybody argue in Rish Lakish? Could Rabbi Yochanan argue in Rish Lakish? Everybody has to hold that using a symbol of near something is going to be a good expression, because we learned Ha'emer Yamin Hareza Shvua. If you said Yamin, you didn't say Shvua, you said Yamin. That's a Shvua. My timer. Lav Mishum Dechsiv Vayorem Yamina Yusmoila El Hashemayim Haibo Van Hentlech Tatat in Himmel Vayishava Bechai Ha'olam. So you see clearly that sure the word Yamin is mentioned in reference to a Shvua, and yet the Brisa says that just saying Yamin alone will be a Shvua. No, it's the same pasuk. Yeah, it's the same pasuk. Yeah. Amri, Zakimara, loy mishum, loy. It's not because it's in the same pasuk. That has nothing to do with it. As a matter of fact, Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. And he says, Mishum Yamin Gufei Ikri Shvua. Not because Yamin is near Shvua in a pasuk. The word Yamin itself means Shvua. The Tanya we learned, Minayin loymer Yamin Shei Shvua, Shenemar Nish Bashem B'Yaminai. So Yamin already took on its own expression as referring to a Shvua. How do you know if you even say Smoil, it's also a Shvua? Shenemar ubizraya uzay. So bizraya uzay has to be referring to the left hand because it says earlier Nishpa Shem B'Yamina in the same pasuk. So therefore, Yamin itself means a Shvua without smichus. So you don't have a raya from here that there's such a thing as smichus. Let's just learn the mission, then we'll stop because then I won't feel so guilty. Someone said, I'm a Nazir, but only from eating grape seeds and eating skins, and from haircuts, Harez a Nazir, he'll be a Nazir, even though he didn't say Yayin, and all of the halachas of Naziris are upon him, even though he didn't accept all of them. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll be Mamshech B'ez Hashem tomorrow.